I still remember that night, the sound of silverware clinking against porcelain, the laughter that felt sharper than knives. Everyone at the table smiled, everyone except me. I was just sitting there, pretending not to notice how they whispered behind their napkins. It was supposed to be a family dinner, a celebration, but it became the night my dignity was served as the main course. You know that feeling when you realize you've been invited, not to be honored, but to be humiliated? That was me. My mother-in-law's words came sweetly at first, dripping in poison. My husband kept his head down. And when the laughter started, I felt my world tilt, like the ground itself didn't want to hold me anymore. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But instead, I smiled, because I knew if I spoke then, they'd twist my pain into weakness. So I swallowed my pride that night, just once. They thought they had shut me down. But they had no idea, I was just getting started. Cliffhanger that night, they broke my silence, and I began planning how to take back my dignity in front of them all. When I first married into the Carter family, I thought I had found a second home. Everyone looked so perfect. Smiling faces in family portraits, polite laughter at dinner, and the illusion of togetherness that could fool anyone. They called themselves a family of tradition, where respect was everything and appearances were sacred. I wanted so badly to belong. In the beginning, I tried. I really did. I learned their favorite recipes, laughed at their inside jokes, dressed the way Evelyn, my mother-in-law, liked her Carter women to dress, elegant, silent, and submissive. She'd often pat my shoulder and say, "You'll learn, Lydia. Our family has a certain standard." I'd nod and smile, pretending I understood. But every time she said our family, it sounded like a door closing, one I wasn't allowed to walk through. Daniel, my husband, wasn't cruel, just distant. He'd tell me, "Don't take it personally, Mom just likes things her way." I wanted to believe him, but every time Evelyn praised Nora, his younger sister, for her refinement or grace, I could feel the comparison cutting through the room. Nora was everything I wasn't, born into privilege, adored by her parents, and perfectly aware of it. Family dinners became silent battlegrounds. I'd serve the food, make small talk, laugh at their jokes, and still, I'd see Evelyn's disapproving glance when I reached for my fork too soon, or the way Nora would smirk when I mentioned my parents were teachers, not business owners. It was always small things, little jabs wrapped in politeness. At Sunday lunches, Evelyn would boast about Nora's new job or Thomas's charity donations, then look at me and say, "And Lydia, you're still doing that home project, right?" As if my work didn't exist, as if I was something she tolerated out of obligation. I thought maybe time would change things. I brought gifts, cooked for birthdays, and wrote thank you cards, every effort to earn their affection met with cold smiles and backhanded compliments. Once, at a neighborhood gathering, I overheard Martha, their old family friend, whisper to another woman, "She's nice enough, but she'll never be a true Carter." I laughed it off, pretending not to care, but that sentence stuck to me like dust I couldn't wash off. There was always a sense of being watched, judged, measured. When I'd speak, they'd listen just long enough to interrupt. When I stayed silent, they'd call me dull. I was always wrong, no matter what I did. Still, I told myself, this is family. Families are complicated. They'll come around. But deep down, I felt something darker moving beneath all the smiles and small talk, something that whispered that this wasn't about acceptance at all. And I was right. Because one night, an innocent dinner invitation would uncover everything. The lies, the gossip, and the betrayal I never saw coming. It started with a simple message from Evelyn, "Family dinner next Friday. Everyone must attend." No warmth. No explanation. Just an order. I remember reading it twice, my stomach tightening. Family dinners were never just dinners in the Carter house, they were performances. Every smile rehearsed, every compliment calculated. But this one felt different. There was a quiet excitement in Nora's tone when she called later that evening. "Mom's planning something special," she said, her voice light, almost teasing. "Make sure you dress up, Lydia. It's an important night." I didn't know then that I was walking into a trap. The days leading up to the dinner felt heavy. Evelyn and Nora would whisper in the kitchen, their voices dropping when I entered. Thomas smiled politely, but his eyes avoided mine. Even Daniel seemed restless, distracted, like he was hiding something. That Friday, the table was dressed in gold and crystal. Evelyn called it a celebration of Daniel's success. She stood tall, proud, and glowing under the chandelier. Everyone congratulated him while I quietly filled their glasses, smiling as though I belonged. But every compliment aimed at him felt like a blade brushing my skin. "Daniel, you've really made this family proud," Evelyn announced, raising her glass. "It's good to see you've learned to choose wisely, both in career and other matters." Her eyes flicked toward me, sharp and knowing. A few guests exchanged looks. I froze, pretending not to understand. Then Nora leaned in with a smirk. "Mom, don't embarrass Lydia," she said sweetly. "She's trying her best to fit in." The laughter that followed wasn't loud, but it was cruel. It filled every corner of that dining room. I felt my cheeks burn. My heart pounded so hard I thought they could hear it. Daniel said nothing. He just kept his eyes on his plate, pretending the roast chicken was fascinating. That silence, his silence, hurt more than their words. Later, as I cleared the dishes, I overheard Evelyn whisper to Martha, the family friend, "She's polite, but you can't turn a waitress into a carter. Daniel deserves better." Waitress. My secret. The job I took years ago to support my family before I met Daniel. Only one person knew that. Him. My husband. I felt something inside me break, not from shame, but from betrayal. He had told them. He had let them use my past as entertainment. When I returned to the table, Evelyn smiled, as if nothing had happened. "You've been quiet all night, Lydia," she said. "Is something wrong?" I looked around the table, faces pretending innocence, eyes filled with curiosity. My voice was steady when I replied, "No, Mrs. Carter. I'm just realizing a few things tonight." She raised an eyebrow. "And what might that be?" I smiled faintly. "That not everyone who calls themselves family understands the meaning of respect." For the first time, the table went silent, but only for a moment. Then Evelyn laughed, brushing it off. "Oh, Lydia, always so sensitive." I excused myself and walked to the hallway mirror. My reflection looked calm, but my heart burned. They had stripped me of dignity in my own home. And that's when it hit me, this wasn't just humiliation. It was war. After that dinner, something inside me changed. I still smiled, still played the part of the obedient daughter-in-law. But the air in that house grew heavier, colder. Every step I took felt like walking through whispers. They didn't even try to hide it anymore. Evelyn began her campaign of polite cruelty. At breakfast, she'd accidentally forget to set a plate for me. "Oh, Lydia, I thought you'd already eaten," she'd say, her tone dripping with fake sweetness. Thomas would hide behind his newspaper, pretending not to hear. Nora was worse. She'd stroll into the living room when guests were around and say things like, "You know, Lydia used to serve tables before marrying my brother. Isn't it inspiring how far she's come?" Her words were coated in honey, but the sting was unmistakable. Guests would exchange awkward smiles, not sure whether to laugh or pity me. One afternoon, during a neighborhood tea, Evelyn hosted a small get-together. I helped her set up, making sure everything looked perfect, silver trays polished, flowers arranged. As people arrived, she smiled proudly and said, "All done by Lydia. She's really learning her place here." Learning her place. Every word felt like a chain around my neck. I wanted to walk out, to scream, but I just poured another cup of tea, my hands trembling. Later, I overheard her speaking to Martha in the corner. "She should be grateful," Evelyn said softly. "Daniel saved her from a life of mediocrity. We've given her everything." I stood frozen, holding a tray, the sound of teacups rattling against the silver. They all looked at me then, every woman in that room, watching me the way one watches a show. I smiled politely, bowed slightly, and walked out. That night, Daniel tried to speak. "Mom didn't mean it that way," he said quietly. "She just worries you don't fit." I looked at him, my voice shaking but calm. "She doesn't worry, Daniel. She enjoys it." He sighed, avoiding my eyes. "Please, Lydia, don't make things harder than they already are." Harder? For whom? For me, who lived every day as a ghost in that house. Or for him, who was too weak to stand up for me. As weeks passed, the humiliations multiplied. At a charity event, Evelyn forgot to include my name in the family announcement. Nora joked about my simple background in front of Thomas's business partners. Even the household staff began treating me differently, hesitant, distant, as if they feared Evelyn more than they respected me. Every insult, every smirk, every whispered word carved deeper into me. But I stayed silent, not out of fear, but out of focus. I began to see their patterns, their lies. Evelyn cared more about the family's reputation than its soul. Nora wanted attention at any cost. And Daniel, he wanted peace, even if it meant losing me piece by piece. One evening, I stood by the dining room door, watching Evelyn and Nora whisper over the next family gathering. Their smiles were too bright, too rehearsed. Something was coming, I could feel it. A storm gathering under the surface, waiting to strike again. That's when I made a silent promise to myself. The next time they try to humiliate me, I won't walk away. I'll make sure they never forget it. It was supposed to be another of Evelyn's perfect evenings, a family celebration for Thomas's birthday. The mansion glowed with candlelight, laughter echoed through the halls, and I could smell the roast duck I had spent hours preparing. I told myself this time would be different. Maybe, just maybe, they'd see me as part of the family at last. But deep down, I knew better. As guests began arriving, Evelyn fluttered about like a queen, Nora followed her every move, and Daniel stood beside them, smiling, looking every bit the golden sun. I adjusted the tablecloth one last time and tried to blend into the background, as I always did. When everyone had gathered, Evelyn tapped her glass. "Before we start dinner," she said, her voice sugary and proud, "there's a little announcement we'd like to make." My heart skipped. An announcement? Daniel hadn't mentioned anything. She continued, "Thomas and I have decided it's time to finalize the family estate plans. We've been thinking about how best to secure the Carter legacy." I glanced at Daniel. He avoided my eyes. Evelyn smiled. "Of course, everything will stay within the family. Daniel and Nora will carry it forward. That's how it should be." There was a polite wave of applause. I stood still, the sound ringing in my ears like distant thunder. "Wait," I whispered. "What about me?" Evelyn turned, smiling sweetly. "Oh, Lydia dear, don't look so tense. You'll be fine, Daniel will take care of you. This isn't your concern." The room chuckled softly, but I couldn't move. Every word felt like a slap. "But I've been part of this family for 6 years," I said quietly. "I've worked, supported, built." Nora interrupted with a smirk. "Come on, Lydia. Don't make this about you. We're talking about bloodline responsibility, not emotional contributions." Her words hit harder than I expected. I looked around, faces turned away, Daniel's included. My throat burned, my eyes stung. Then Evelyn stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough for others to hear. "You're a sweet girl, but some people are meant to serve the table, not sit at it." Laughter rippled again. I felt my knees weaken, but I didn't fall. Not in front of them. Not this time. The rest of the night blurred. Words became noise, faces became shadows. I don't even remember how I got home. I just remember standing in front of the mirror, staring at a woman I barely recognized. My lipstick was smeared, my eyes swollen, my dignity shattered. Daniel came in hours later. "Lydia, please don't take it personally. Mom didn't mean to." I turned to him slowly. "Didn't mean to what? Destroy me? Embarrass me in front of your family?" He sighed, frustrated. "You're overreacting. This is just how things are. You married into this family. You knew who they were." I stepped closer, my voice trembling. "No, Daniel. I knew who you were. And I was wrong." He didn't answer. He just left the room, closing the door softly behind him. That soft click felt louder than a gunshot. The next morning, I sat alone at the breakfast table. The house was silent except for the faint ticking of the clock. I stared at the untouched cup of coffee before me and realized I had no one. No ally. No love. Not even respect. That day, something in me broke, but something else woke up. I walked into the living room, the same one where they had mocked me countless times, and looked around. The portraits of the perfect Carter family hung proudly, smiling faces hiding rot beneath their shine. I whispered to myself, if they want perfection, I'll show them what truth looks like. It wasn't anger that filled me then. It was clarity. Cold, precise clarity. I began remembering things Evelyn and Nora had said, the hushed conversations about financial trouble, the fake charity Nora claimed to run, the donations that never reached the poor. Secrets that could ruin them if spoken aloud. They wanted to humiliate me publicly. Now they had given me every reason to return the favor, not out of spite, but justice. That night, I wrote in my journal, They took my dignity thinking I'd stay silent. But dignity isn't something you can steal, it's something you force others to see again. I closed the book and smiled faintly. For the first time in months, I felt calm. The woman they tried to break was gone. What stood in her place was someone they should have never underestimated. After that morning, when the house felt emptier than ever, I stopped pretending to float through life. The woman who had smiled through knives was gone. In her place was someone who had learned how to turn pain into purpose. I began, quietly, to rebuild myself, not with rage, but with a cold, steady focus. First, I collected what they'd left behind. Little things at home, in drawers, in the junk mail stacked by Thomas's desk, letters with Evelyn's handwriting, envelopes from banks, receipts from events Nora insisted were charitable. I didn't break into anything, I simply paid attention in a house full of careless pride. Pride leaves traces. Secrets do, too. I told Clara everything. She held my hand and said, "You don't have to destroy them, Lydia. You just have to make them accountable." Those words felt like oxygen. Clara helped me organize files, dates, names, so my anger wouldn't be scattered, so it could be aimed. We found more than whispers, overdue notices Evelyn tried to hide, cancelled checks from Nora's charity that went straight back to her account, and emails that proved a pattern of lies and cover-ups. Each paper turned the story from rumor to fact. I also started speaking to people I trusted. Mrs. Allen, the neighbor who always noticed the comings and goings, the retired accountant at my church who paid attention to numbers, the housekeeper who had seen envelopes passed onto tables. They didn't want to hurt anyone, but they owed me the truth of what they'd seen. One by one, they agreed to tell it, on condition that I expose the truth fairly, not vindictively. "We want the truth," Mrs. Allen said, biting her lip. "Not revenge." My plan took shape like a careful sculpture. I would not shout at them in the dining room and call them liars. I would show the proof in a way that could not be argued away, documents, witnesses, and a stage where reputation mattered most. I thought about where their pride lived, the charity gala, the community board, the next big family event where everyone would be watching. That's where the truth would land with weight. Daniel worried, as expected. "Are you sure?" he asked one evening, voice small. "This could destroy them, and us." I looked at him, calm now. "They destroyed us the night they chose shame over love," I said. "I'm not out to ruin anyone for cruelty. I'm out to restore what they stole from me." There were doubts, late nights when I wanted to throw the files in the trash and pretend it had never happened. There were small, human fears. What if they turned the story around? What if I lost everything? But each time, I thought of that dinner table and the way their laughter had hollowed me out. That memory steadied me more than any fear could unsteady me. I prepared for consequences. I made contacts who could verify bank transfers and receipts. I rehearsed what I would say, how I would remain composed. My revenge would not be wild or loud. It would be surgical, truth carried on paper and witness, unfolding where their image mattered most. At night, I locked my files in a small case and slid the key into the hollow of an old cookbook I kept on the shelf, something Evelyn would never think to look through. I whispered to myself, "This is not about breaking them. It's about making them face what they chose to hide." When the day of the confrontation neared, my hands stopped shaking. I felt steady, like someone who has learned to walk on a narrow ledge and discovered she can. I was no longer the woman who swallowed insults. I was a woman who held evidence and patience in equal measure. The night of the confrontation looked almost identical to the night of my humiliation. Same crystal glasses, same golden plates, same soft music that used to feel elegant but now sounded like a lie echoing through the house. Evelyn had planned this dinner for her charity committee, proud to host the Carter family's legacy night. What she didn't know was that she had set the stage for her own exposure. Guests arrived in pearls and confidence. Nora floated in like a swan in silk, smiling too wide. Daniel stood beside her mother again, rehearsing the role of the loyal son. I, however, was calm, almost serene. Inside me, there was no anger left. Only truth, sharp and ready. When dinner began, Evelyn raised her glass. "To family," she said, her voice full of control. "And to the legacy we've built together." I rose from my seat. "If we're to toast to legacy," I said evenly, "we should make sure it's an honest one." The room stilled. You could hear the candles flicker. Evelyn's smile froze mid-sip. "Lydia, dear, what are you doing?" "I'm returning something you lost," I replied. Your truth. I placed a small folder on the table, neat, silent, unthreatening. But as I opened it, the weight of every hidden lie spilled into the light. These, I said, my voice calm but steady, are the bank statements from the Carter Family Foundation. Nora's charity project. The one that never delivered the promised donations. A murmur rippled across the table. Nora's face turned pale. That's private, she snapped. So is stealing, I said softly. And these letters, I held up another sheet, show how you borrowed money from local sponsors and used it for your own expenses. Someone gasped. Evelyn reached for the folder, but I slid it away. Don't, I said. There's more. Then I turned to Evelyn. And here, letters from the bank about your hidden debts. The same debts you covered using the foundation's funds. Evelyn stood, trembling. You don't understand. Oh, I do, I interrupted, my tone turning colder. You lied to every person in this room about your philanthropy. You lied to your own husband. You used the very charity that made you respected to hide your shame. Thomas's face was pale. He whispered, Evelyn, is this true? She opened her mouth but no words came. For a moment, the entire room was silent except for the clinking of someone's spoon trembling in their hand. I looked at Daniel, his eyes wide, pleading. Lydia, please stop. This isn't the way. I turned to him, my voice breaking but firm. You had your chance to speak the truth, Daniel. You chose silence when they laughed at me. Tonight, I speak for myself. I stepped back from the table and let the truth settle in the room like smoke after a fire. People began murmuring. Martha whispered to Mrs. Allen, Thomas stood up and left the room without a word, and Nora sat frozen, mascara streaking down her face. Evelyn finally collapsed back into her chair, whispering, You've ruined us. I met her eyes. No, I said softly. You ruined yourself the moment you decided reputation was more important than respect. I gathered the papers, slid them back into the folder, and turned toward the door. You once told me I'd never rise to your standards, I said, pausing at the threshold. You were right. I rose above them. And with that, I walked out, past their shocked faces, past the silence that followed. Behind me, I heard Evelyn whisper, What have we done? The night air outside was cold, but I felt free. For the first time in years, I breathed without shame. The truth had finally spoken, and it spoke louder than their lies ever could. That night, I didn't destroy the Carter family. I just removed the mask they wore. And in that moment, I realized, justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it simply walks away with its head held high. The morning after the dinner was impossibly still. No phone calls. No footsteps in the hallway. Just silence, thick, heavy, and honest. The house that once echoed with laughter and gossip now felt hollow, stripped bare of its pretenses. I stood by the window with a cup of coffee, watching the dawn light spill across the garden. For the first time in years, the air felt clean. The truth had scorched everything false the night before, leaving behind only ashes and freedom. Daniel came down the stairs slowly, his face pale and drawn. He didn't speak at first. He just looked at me, like a man staring at something he'd only now begun to understand. They are devastated, he finally said. Mother hasn't come out of her room. Nora's gone to stay with a friend. The press is already calling. I nodded, my voice steady. Maybe now they'll realize that the truth isn't a weapon, it's a mirror. He rubbed his temples. You could have destroyed us, Lydia. But you didn't. You only showed what was already there. I met his eyes. I didn't destroy anything, Daniel. I just stopped pretending. He had no answer. There was no argument left to make. By noon, I packed a small suitcase. Not out of anger, but out of peace. I didn't slam doors or raise my voice. I simply left the way I had stayed. Quietly, with dignity. Mrs. Allen was standing by her fence when I stepped outside. She gave me a soft smile. You did what most people never have the courage to do, dear, she said. I smiled back. Courage isn't loud, I told her. It's just the decision to stop accepting disrespect. I moved into a small apartment across town, nothing grand, but mine. The silence there was different. It wasn't the silence of being ignored. It was the silence of peace earned. I spent my days writing again, helping a local women's shelter organize events, teaching others how to rebuild their confidence after betrayal. Every story I heard reminded me of my own journey, of how easily dignity can be taken when you hand over your voice. Sometimes, I'd see Evelyn's face on local news, looking smaller, humbler. Rumors said the family charity had dissolved, that she'd retreated from public life. I didn't rejoice in that. I just hoped she finally understood that respect isn't built on reputation, it's built on truth. One evening, Daniel called. His voice trembled. "Lydia, do you hate me?" I thought for a long moment. "No," I said quietly. "Hate is heavy. I left it with you." He was silent. Then he whispered, "You really did rise above us." "I had to," I said softly. "It was the only way to breathe." When I hung up, I felt the last piece of my past settle into stillness. There was no revenge left in me, only a strange, beautiful calm. I looked in the mirror that night, and for the first time, I saw not a victim, not a wife, not a Carter. Just Lydia, whole, dignified, and unbroken.